geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gats and gittens, signors and signoras, mein Damen and Herren, mushy, buongiorno. Welcome to another fantastic, thrill-packed, information-loaded, curiosity-salving episode of Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me questions about what I do for a living. And what do I do for a living? Everybody, I write comic books. If you want to get a hold of me, let's get this out of the way, a little housekeeping. You want to get a hold of me, brunobookstore@gmail.com. brunobookstore@gmail.com is the most reliable way to reach me with your amazing questions, much like the folks who have dropped questions this week. Let's not waste one more second of your precious time. Joe Alexander, he wants to know, another legend lost. Robert Duvall was one of the all-time greats. Somewhat rare in that his best work may have been in the second half of his life. My favorite work of his was in Lonesome Dove as Gus McCrae. Curious if you were a fan, and as a Western writer and aficionado, what your thoughts were on the Lonesome Dove miniseries. Yeah, I was a fan of Duvall's. I really first noticed him in Godfather. I mean, I think most people first noticed him in Godfather. But, over the years, I've realized that I've been watching this guy for a long time, and he did a lot of TV in the early 60s. An Outer Limits episode I watched recently. And so this guy was in a lot of stuff. And, but obviously Godfather allows him to really make an impression. And, I'm a fan of his work. He's one of, we all have these actors that you're looking, do I want to see this movie? Ooh, it's got that guy in it. Yeah, I want to see it. Even if it's a piece of crap, I know this guy's going to be great. And Duvall was always great. Even in thankless roles, he was terrific. And, apparently he really liked being in Westerns. I mean, really dug Westerns. Gus McCrae is his favorite role. Whenever he was interviewed, people would say, what was your favorite part to play? And readily, Gus McCrae, my favorite role. But, I remember him in Westerns in the 70s. He was in a Burt Lancaster vehicle called Lawman. He was in the Great Northfield, Minnesota raid. He had a large part in the Clint Eastwood Western Joe Kidd. And, and like I say, he obviously loved Westerns. And his performance in Lonesome Dove is indelible. Like almost everybody. I watched Lonesome Dove when it first aired on CBS. I think I've seen it 2 or 3 times afterwards. I would probably watch it more, but my wife finds it depressing. And it's not a feel-good story. None of the McMurtry Western stories are feel-good stories, because there aren't a lot of feel-good stories in the American West. There's an awful lot of tragedy and abuse and all the rest. But what I like, and this is the second time, Lonesome Dove marks the second time that Robert Duvall wears basically a Stetson with the front end punched in, a 10-gallon hat. And I noticed the day before he died, I was watching Lawman, which he has a pretty substantial role in, Burt Lancaster movie, 1970. And he had the same hat. And then generally every Western after Lonesome Dove, he picks this, might have been exactly the same hat. He picks that Stetson with the punched in front end. So he must have really liked that hat. And of course it's period accurate, which is a lot of times in particularly in older Westerns, you see what Elmore Leonard referred to as Dale Evans hats. These hats were not accurate to the Old West. But I think Robert Duvall was enough of a student of the Old West. And the thing that makes him so effective in Westerns is, he looks comfortable in what he's doing. He looks like when he's saddling a horse, or pulling a 6-gun, or strapping on a gun belt. He looks like he's done it a million times. And that's a when you bring that level of authenticity. And I think Duvall was one of those actors whose genuineness as a human being came across. This guy was the same guy off screen as he was on. And I think that really, brings a lot. When you can look at an actor's eyes and see it's maybe this isn't all acting. And actors draw on their own emotions for things. I mean, scenes in The Godfather where, he's an ancillary character. He's not part of the main family. He's not a Corleone and everything else, but he's there, and you can see that the sincerity that he feels for these people, because basically, they gave him a second chance in life. Don Corleone gives him a second chance in life by sending him to law school and all that stuff. And you can see, hey, I'm not a member of this family, but I am, and I deeply care about these people. And it's not there in the dialogue. It's all there in his eyes. And just an amazing, amazing actor. And another favorite of mine of his was Broken Trail, which I guess is the last actual real Western he was in with Thomas Hayden Church. It was a Walter Hill project. It was a two-night event on AMC, which got huge ratings for a basic cable show. It beat everything else on the air. And I think that's largely due to Duvall and people remembering Lonesome Dove and, wanting some more of that magic. But terrific actor, 95 years old, and he was acting pretty much up to the bitter end there. And, Godspeed, Mr. Duvall. Thank you for all the entertainment. And thank you for the earnestness of the way you approached acting. Very much appreciated. A natural talent. Michael's Gambati. Do you prefer Batman as a street-level hero fighting mobsters, human traffickers, rapists? Just curious if you prefer Batman battling street-level crimes or big, chaotic, high-concept villain plots. I kind of like both. I've always been a proponent of, Batman is, equal opportunity crime fighter. It doesn't matter what it is. If he sees something wrong, he's not going to be standing on the rooftop, wondering what the Penguin's doing and ignore an old lady getting her purse snatched, and I like that. I like that in Spider-Man too, that they'll get involved in, street level crime. And I wrote an awful lot of stories where Batman was involved with stopping a bank heist or, counterfeiting ring or whatever. He any kind of crime was, I imagine he would stop graffiti, quote unquote, artists from tagging a wall. Because, this is his city, man. You're not doing that. So, I mean, yeah, I like that idea. And if you're a vigilante, there's going to be some slow nights. And yeah, I like the big, grand, nightfall kind of things and all the rest. I'm not as crazy about him being in the Justice League and going into outer space and fighting, squid monsters and stuff like that. And, that never made sense to me as a kid. But yeah, I'm, hands on, fighting in an alley, outnumbered, and coming out triumphant, because let's face it, you and I, I'm speaking to the general you, anybody listening, we're not going to meet a Two-Face in our life. We're not going to run into a Killer Croc, but somebody could try to carjack us or threaten us at an ATM or whatever, and it'd be nice to know Batman was there. Oh, same thing for the Punisher. I used to get crap from my editor on the Punisher because I wrote so many stories where, Frank's in line, he's in the drive-through at a fast food and sees a crime. My ultimate Punisher story would be Punisher reads in the newspaper about, because I read this in the newspaper, about people stealing carry-on bags at the airport. They would go in, you go into the men's room if you're waiting flight, and if you're a guy, you go in the stall and you hang your I guess a woman too, you hang your carry-on bag on that hook on the door. And what was going on was thieves were coming in, and you're sitting there with your pants around your ankles, you're very vulnerable, and here an arm comes over the top of the stall door and takes your carry-on back. And this was going on over and over again. And I really wanted to do a story, and I kept pitching it, where Punisher, it's just be like a little 8-pager. Punisher basically sitting in a men's room stall at LaGuardia or Kennedy with a pump shotgun across his knees. And the first time he sees a hand come over that door, he lets the guy on the other side have it. They would never let me do that. So, but I'm all about, taking down hoods who, common everyday thugs. I think it adds to the reality of it. And also it's a kind of cathartic for us as, normal human beings to see these, comic book heroes taking down, creeps that could, we could very well encounter on a city street. So there you go. Joshua Ignatowski, where have you been? Joshua says, what's an episode of The Tick that really sticks with you? I hope you mean the animated series, because that's what I'm going to talk about. I love The Tick. I love the animated series. My kids were just the right age for Saturday morning cartoons. I probably would have watched this one anyway. And I dug watching The Tick with them. And it was a smart show. It was really funny. A very faithful adaptation of the comic. I like the idea that the comic creator was closely involved with the animated show, providing storylines and stuff like that. So that was great. But the best one was the episode with Chairface Chippendale. Chairface Chippendale is a villain who has a chair for a head. Just like a kitchen chair for a head, and it makes no sense. How does he see? How does he talk? But he does, and this is like the absurdity of The Tick boiled down all to one character, and I really like that episode because it's just so completely absurd. And then the idea that Tick thwarts Chairface Chippendale's villainous plot to write his own name on the moon. I mean, that's crazy. That is such a crazy idea. My hat is off to the people that worked on this, because it's so nuts. And that's the one that most readily comes to mind when I think about that series. Twin spin. Joshua gets himself a twin spin. He's got a mantle crowded with them. He's asked so many questions here. And by the way, I mean, Joshua routinely asks like 24 questions. I only pick a few. Otherwise, the show would be 100% Joshua every week. Anyway, Joshua has this really interesting question. I'm really glad he asked it. My family's dog Daisy doesn't believe, what are you, a Bumstead? My family's dog Daisy doesn't believe in a lot of things she sees on screens, likely because she can't smell them. Have you found this to be the case with any dogs you've known? I don't own a dog currently, but I do have cats, a couple of cats. And because of the high definition, cats can see the TV. They can certainly hear the noises coming out of it. The quality of noise is better, but they can see the images like looking out a window. I don't know if anybody who's got cats is going to say, yeah, Chuck's right here. Now we have a male cat, and he every once in a while he'll look up, if something's moving. And I found that cats' favorite movie is Lawrence of Arabia, all cats, because there's, images with lots of negative space and little men on riding camels riding across them. They're probably John Ford fans too. I haven't tried them on Stagecoach or The Searchers, but they like seeing that little image moving across the screen. But we have a little black cat. This isn't a picture of her. I just pulled one off the internet, but it looks exactly like her, except she's got a little notch in her ear, out of her ear, from when she was a kitten. But I didn't put it there. She was trapped in a building. She was trapped in an outbuilding on a piece of property I own. She was left behind. All of her litter mates managed to escape from this place. She couldn't. And my assumption is she ripped a little notch in her ear trying to get out of this room. And my youngest boy found her there and brought her home. And, I'm a sucker. We kept her. So anyway, Annie, who's a brilliant cat, loves TV. Freaking loves TV. And she will watch lots of things, particularly if there's an animal in it. particularly, she doesn't like movies with dogs in them. But if there's a movie with a cat, I recently watched Caught Stealing, and there's a cat in that story who plays a major part in the plot line, and she parked herself next to the TV and just sat waiting for that cat to show up again. Um, and I think this is true with everybody. I think the cats see the image, and cats are more so than dogs are predatory, and they're looking for movement, which is really, really interesting to me, because it doesn't matter if the image is in color or black and white. They can see the movement, and they know that movement is an animal. Now, one channel on YouTube that Annie is addicted to the point where we only we restrict her screen time. We only let her watch this like once a week. There's a channel on YouTube called Outdoor Theater. And what happens on Outdoor Theater is these people, I think they're in the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. And what they'll do is they'll go out to some remote location in the woods and dump some sort of foodstuffs there. In this episode, it's a 10-pound glob of peanut butter. But they'll put out feed corn, a salt lick, raw steaks, sweet feed, just about anything you can. Watermelon one time was particularly entertaining. But the peanut butter one's a great episode. And animals will show up. And these videos are, generally an hour long, and they'll show highlights. And some of them at nighttime, shot with night vision. And Annie will... she'll get on her hind legs on a chair next to our TV cabinet and put her feet up on the TV cabinet and just stare from one corner of the TV. And she's waiting for one of the animals to come down near the corner where she's situated herself. And her favorite are chipmunks. When chipmunks show up, she goes wild, and she'll actually leap at the screen, and make those weird burbling cat noises that cats make when they see something they want to kill. But she does not like it when coyotes show up. She doesn't. But she's learned not to leave the screen. She'll stay there, but you can tell she sort of rears back a little bit. So if you have cats, try this channel. It's called Outdoor Theater, and it's interesting anyway. The skunks show up. I mean, it's just amazing, But her favorite are chipmunks. Cats watching TV. It's like that. It's like, you've ever seen the movie Scrooged? Robert Mitchum plays a TV executive who suggests they start programming more for animals. Thomas Pellegrino. He had another question, and this is a follow-up, but I didn't use the other question. Also, your new crowdfunding venture looks very exciting. Is Seven Deadly Sinners similar to your older work, such as Car Warriors and Racer X? Both great stories. I'm so glad you brought this up. Yes, Seven Deadly Sinners is in that vein. It's very much car action, very much, but it's set in the 70s. It's about a biker gang. You probably already figured out. It largely follows the plot structure of the Seventh Samurai or Magnificent Seven, and seven badass bikers show up to help an old buddy who has a marijuana farm, but is being sort of crushed by the local law enforcement, the county sheriff, stuff like that. And these outlaw bikers show up to help their old pal bring the Acapulco gold, $1 million worth of it, to market in an absolutely epic car chase that would be impossible to present if I wasn't teamed with the amazing Bob C. Harden on the project. And this is a project that is decades in the making. I first got this idea back in the 80s. I've had the title for this in my head since the 70s. I always wanted to do a story called The Seven Deadly Sinners. After I saw those words written in magic marker on the wall of a subway car once. And I thought, yeah, I'm sticking that in the back of my head. And this is a 120-page graphic novel from Rippasend, which I'll talk a little bit about later. One of you has a question about Rippasend. And this is, uh, 70s motorcycle gang car chase action. And, there's humor and interesting characters and all the rest of it. But it is available on pre-order. I will, of course, put the link down below, and you can order the 7 Deadly Sinners. And not only that, but I don't get to talk about this much, and I just got high-res images today. Along with the graphic novel, you can also purchase merch. And all the merch is designed by Bob C. Hardin, because this is kind of his thing. In addition to being an absolutely awesome cartoonist, one of my favorite guys to work with, he's also very much a design guy. And he designed these two, fantastic T-shirts that you can order along with the project. We also have these stickers, which I insisted on. I want stickers. When I was a kid, I loved rally stickers. I used to hang around our local auto parts store, begging for free stickers and, castor oil or STP stickers. And we also have the movie poster that Bob came up with. And it is a full-size one-sheet movie poster, and there are 3 versions. There's the red and black movie poster, which they would create for newspaper ads or for second runs. There's the full color poster, and there's a 3D poster with 3D glasses. And you can get all 3 or get one, and it is a full-sized one-sheet movie poster, and it's really cool. The artwork's fantastic. And the legendary beard cozy. This is what delayed the project by months as we try to figure out how to work this beer koozie thing. And it's just a foam thing. You just stick your beer can or soda can in, and Bob did the More Beer logo, and we loved the More Beer logo. So what's everyone want? More beer. And remember, 7 Deadly Sinners is a Dick's Hard production, and it is rated R. So don't let the kids look at it. Don't read it at work. Twin Spin. Thomas is back with a second question. Would you write a Western for the Rippaverse? This would make sense, being as Flora Spark is set in Texas. Yeah, I would. I mean, I like writing Westerns. I have 2 Western novels out. Currently, Snakehand and La Gringa. I am nearly finished a 3rd one, which will be a companion to these books, called Gallows. And I'm looking forward to, I have an idea for a 4th one that I can't wait to get to. I want, Westerns are, my dream is to just go to a cabin in the woods for the rest of my life and just write Westerns. Because I don't have to do a whole lot of reference, because it's already all in my head, and I got tons of plot lines, and, that's what I want to do, but they keep dragging me back in to do more comics. But yeah, I would do a Rippaverse comic, and I have done quite a few. I did Man Called Frank for Marvel. I did a Good, the Bad, and the Ugly miniseries and a Lone Ranger series at Dynamite. And I also, was honored to be able to write some Tex Willer stories for Benelli. And in fact, my one, big graphic album for them, full color graphic album, Cinnamon Wells, featuring Tex Willer, is part of a 6-volume set from Epicenter Comics. And it is by me, written by me, translated to English for the first time. Benelli is an Italian company. Tex has been around for 75 years, and I love it. It's the greatest Western comic in the world. And I was very, very honored to have them finally give in to me bugging them to let me write a few. So very happy about that. And just today on my doorstep came Savage Tales, the Savage Tales reboot collection from Fantagraphics, part of their Lost Marvels series. And it's a terrific volume. And this has 4 Westerns by me, drawn by John Severin and John Buscema. This is some of my earliest comic book work was Westerns written for Savage Tales. So yeah, I love the genre. Absolutely love the genre. And I would, and the thing is, I mean, Rippa has a guy, Jack Herbert, could draw a hell of a Western. I love Joe Bennett, but if I'm going to do a Western, I'm going to go with Jack Herbert. I think he's got the yeah, that would be awesome to work with him on a Western. So, I'm going to propose one eventually. So, there you go. Now, Wayne Hall comes along with an interesting question about Rippaverse and Rippasend. I hate to ask you, well, that's what we're here for, but I can't find the answer anywhere. What is the difference between Rippaverse and Rippasend? I couldn't find your latest book until I got an email from Rippasend. Now, I'm going to make it very simple for everyone. Rippasend is to Rippaverse what Epic was to Marvel Comics. Now, if any of you are old enough to remember, Epic Comics was a creation of, it was an imprint at Marvel, separate imprint created by Archie Goodwin. And what it was it was creator-owned projects. So Marvel would publish it under the Epic imprint, but the creators, the artist and writer generally, would maintain copyright. They would maintain creator ownership. So Frank Scirocco and Carl Potts own Alien Legion, even though it was published by Epic under Marvel. And they had a creator-owned deal, and it had a cycle of 5 years that Marvel would have exclusive rights to publish this material for 5 years. And then the rights would revert back to the original creators, and Marvel would own no part of the project after that 5 years. But within that 5 years, if a TV show, game, toy line, movie were created from that project within that 5-year period, Marvel would have a percentage of the ancillary profits. And it was a really fair contract. It was a really terrific contract. I created a whole bunch of stuff for this line. And, sadly, it's gone away. Now let's give credit where credit is due. Archie's creator-owned deal in the Epic line was largely, and by largely I mean 100%, inspired by Dean Mulaney's same creator-owned deal at Eclipse Comics. Now, Eclipse Comics was largely creator-owned stuff. They didn't have a separate imprint. Most of the stuff at Eclipse was creator-owned, and it was the same deal. It was a 5-year window of publication, and if you made some sort of a deal for a movie, TV show, whatnot, within that 5 years, Eclipse would own a piece of that. And it was perfectly fair. And Dean wrote those contracts, and they were terrific. I mean, I did The Hobbit, which was work for hire, but I did The Hobbit under an Eclipse contract written by Dean, and it's so ironclad and so foolproof that every publisher who publishes has to honor it. And thank you, Dean. but both these guys, Archie and Dean, basically inspired this this creative nuclear reactor, because everybody's like, yeah, I can get my book published by a major publisher and I'll still own it. Yeah, let's do that. And it's these two guys who really brought all that about, and for the most part popularized it. Now Eric comes along, and he wants to do basically the same thing. So he creates an imprint called Rippasend that is, it's like Epic, it's like Eclipse, and his creator-owned contract is very much the Dean Mulaney model, except actually better. When I first approached him with Seven Deadly Sinners, he told me the highlights of what their deal was, and I'm like, Eric, that's actually a little too generous. You're taking the risk with this, and there's not a lot of payback for you. You're going to get your negative costs covered, but it seems, and he said, no, this is the way he wanted it. And they've done some very successful crowdfunders, and gotten exposure that I could never have gotten on my own. So I'm very, very grateful to have been a part of a Rippasend deal. But that's, basically the history of creator-owned comics, which starts with Dean, goes through Archie, and winds up with Eric with much the same kind of deal. And I'm very, very happy about it. I mean, it's one thing, okay, I'm going to write a Spider-Man story, or I'm going to, write an Archie story, or, Archie Andrews story, and I'm going to be happy because I'm a fan of those things or whatever. And that's cool. But when I'm creating comics that I will own, that someday maybe my grandchildren will get money for. That's a terrific incentive. And thanks to the folks at Rippasend for helping Bob and I out to bring Seven Deadly Sinners to life, and some other projects down the road. I got some stuff I want to pitch. Keep doing work for Rippasend as well as the Rippaverse. So that's the difference. It's an imprint of the Rippaverse meant for creator-owned projects. David Jordan, what's your opinion on the way that they reprint old comics where the art is shrank on the page and the colors are very bright? To me, the coloring should be a lot more subtle and the art should never be shrunk. I have no idea why they do that. Well, it's been explained to me that it's all about trim. There's a limited, to them, there's a limited way that these books can be published. And I share your pain, because I remember when they say they're going to do Deadly Hands of Kung Fu omnibuses at Marvel and Conan, Savage Sword of Conan omnibuses at Marvel. I'm like, I got to have all of them. I mean, have a complete run of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu? Yeah, sign me up. And I got the books, and I was really, really disappointed because they printed them at the same aspect or trim size as all their other omnibuses. Okay? Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, whatever. And the same with DC. There's this omnibus size, this trim size. The pages, X amount wide and X amount tall. Well, the magazines, Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, Savage Sword of Conan, the Marvel horror magazines, they're wider. The art is wider, but they didn't allow for that and make the actual books wider. Instead, what they did was they sort of actually shrunk the pages down a little bit, and they put these headers and footers on them. So you're not looking at an exact recreation of the interior of an issue of Savage Sword of Conan or Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. You're looking at like a reduced version with this distracting header and footer, which they make even more distracting by having a kind of a background tone to it, to really just point out how they, punted this whole thing. And I found that like unacceptable. I remember I got my first Deadly Hands and first Savage Sword and thought, nah, these are not going on my shelf. And I quite frankly put them up on eBay and sold them. It's like, I don't want these. This isn't what I wanted. This isn't what I expected. I'm just a big geek. I mean, I just want the stuff perfect. You do too. You do too. Now, for people doing it right, Fantagraphics did a collection of the Savage Tales reboot, which I mentioned earlier. The Larry Hama edited 1980s Savage Tales, which sadly only ran for 8 issues. And they do this terrific hardcover book. It's not cheap, $65, but it's every issue collected. And the paper's right. And the stories are in black and white. And the trim is right. I mean, you open the book and it looks just like the magazines looked. There's no fooling around with the size of the pages. The pages are the same size as the magazine, if not a little larger. And there's no trim at the top and bottom to distract you from your reading experience. And it's a beautiful package, and I don't understand why not DC, but why Marvel couldn't do the same thing. And I look at the Titan editions, and they're the same way. Of Savage Sword of Conan, the Titan editions are the same way. They have this trim top and bottom. It's just, they should have taken a little more care. But the Fantagraphics thing, the paper, everything else just gives you that feel. Now, when you get to the color stuff, I have a bunch of omnibuses and they're fine. They're fine. But the paper is a little too shiny, and I agree with you, the colors are a little too bright. If you really want to see something amazing in a reprinted omnibus and a reprinted comic, the Taschen Marvel editions are amazing. I mean, if they keep printing I'm going to go broke if they keep printing these things, because these things are like, they're 200 hours a piece, and they're huge. They're bigger, much bigger than an omnibus. I'd say they're 25% larger than an omnibus, and they're on beautiful paper. It's beautiful paper that replicates the feel and look of the original comic book paper, but it's a finer paper. And because it's like the old comic book paper, it's more absorbent, and the colors come off better. The colors look, they look a whole lot better than the original published comics, but they don't look so bright that they're distracting. They really did a great job recreating the look and feel. I mean, as a comic book fan, lifelong comic book fan, I mean, I came close to tears when I opened the first Spider-Man one, because it's just so freaking beautiful. And of course, the covers are done on slick paper, everything else. I know they're $200, but man, if you're a comic book fan, the experience cannot be replicated. Reading one of these, they've done 2 volumes of Spider-Man, 2 volumes of Avengers. They've done X-Men, Buscema's Silver Surfer, and unfortunately, only 1 volume of Fantastic Four. I really was hoping with the movie they would do a second one. I don't know what the holdup there is, but in any case, that's the creme de la creme. But yeah, I mean, they should take more care with these reprints, because if you're like me, you want to make this a permanent addition to your library. And it'd be nice if they were, a little more care had been taken. All right, just one more thing. Todd MacFarlane once again brings up the subject in an interview about art, the importance of art versus writing in comics. And of course, Todd thinks art is the most important thing. And he's wrong. He's wrong. He's been wrong on this subject for almost 40 years. Art is not more important than writing in comics. And conversely, speaking as a writer, writing is not more important than the art. They share an equal importance with one another. It's a balancing act between the two. And it's interesting because Phil Boyle, a friend of mine, he runs a great chain of comic stores called Coliseum Comics here in Florida and in Texas. He posted today that artists sell issue 1s and writers sell the series. And that's a great way to put it, because you might buy the art because it's pretty, but if the story ain't there, you might not buy the next issue. And Todd, God bless him, he's just a wonderful guy, terrific creator, can't say enough about the guy, but he's just wrong on this. And the proof is in the fact that the steep decline in sales at Image. I mean, when Image Comics first came out, when the original crew was there, Silvestri and Jim Lee and Liefeld and MacFarlane, and they were just kicking ass. I mean, they're selling millions of copies. And this thing was just a roaring concern that looked like it was never going to stop. But the wheels came off after like a year or so. They started to come off because the writing wasn't there. And they were selling to kids, they were selling to younger audience, they were selling to a lot of speculators too, but they were selling to kids who actually wanted to read the comics. And the problem is that, the stories weren't there. There wasn't, they weren't paying attention to subplots, character development, the dialogue. Everybody sounded the same when they talked. There was no thought to, what are we going to put in these stories to bring the reader back again? It was just like, oh, the art's so beautiful, they'll just keep buying it to stare at the pages. And you would look at it and go, yeah, these comics are pretty and they're well drawn and everything else. But then when you would try to read them, with the exception of Savage Dragon, they were virtually unreadable. There wasn't, Eric Larson, to his credit, understood, hey, I got to have a story here. And he did create characters that were engaging and thought about ABC plotting and thought about subplots, thought about resolving storylines, thought about all these things. and continually challenging himself. But the others didn't. They would hire their old college roommate, or just make the story up as they went along, and and that's the proof that you need both. You really need both. And I'm tired of the argument like I'd rather read a bad story with good art than a good story with bad art. You'd read a a good story with mediocre art, and Marvel in the '70s is proof of that. Because there was plenty of, I mean, I read a lot of Marvel comics in the '70s. They weren't that well drawn, but the story was compelling enough to make me keep going. And conversely, there was a lot of Marvel that had beautiful art, and the stories were awful, and I would just lose interest. So, nothing against Todd. Certainly, he's been enormously successful in this field, but it's terrible advice to anybody but him to say that the art is paramount, is so much more important than the writing that you can almost ignore the writing. So, anyway, that's it for me this week. I want to thank you all for listening, watching, and if you go out and lay down that money for Seven Deadly Sinners, you have the undying gratitude of me and Mr. Harden. And I hope I see all of you down the road.